We are here to launch the Hindu's book on China. It's curated by Ananth Krishnan. It's been many months in the making, but I think its release has been timed perfectly when India and China are trying to mend the relationship, and Modi visiting China and meeting Xi after 7 years. So I request Ms. Tirumurti, former permanent representative of India to the United Nations and a seasoned diplomat, once a diplomat, forever a diplomat. So I'm not calling him former diplomat. So asking him to receive the first book from our chairperson, Dr. Nirmala Lakshman, to also present the first copy to Mr. Ram. Both of them would say a few words.
Thank you.
To me, huh? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, firstly, thank you for giving me the privilege of receiving the very first copy of this wonderful book. And the Hindu is an institution which we have all grown up with. Therefore, I am delighted to be here. And let me at the outset, felicitate Mr. Suresh Nambath and the Hindu group for bringing out this excellent book on China, which promises to both inform and provoke the readers into thinking deeper about China and challenging some of the preconceived notions about China, what China is about and where it is heading. Let me commend you on the comprehensive nature of the book and its deep insights. And why I also appreciate the fact that but it's not just about 12 outstanding scholarly essays by practitioners and experts, but also the fact that you have asked younger scholars to write. We need fresh perspectives on China, and that's what we get from this book. Fresh perspectives are vital, since many of us seem to be speculating without knowing the realities inside China. India is now in a situation where we are not quite sure where we stand in the geopolitical scheme of things. I have no doubt that we know our own geopolitical self-worth. But the question is whether the United States, China, the EU and others are seeing us in the same way. India first had to deal with China as a neighbor. After 1962, we had succeeded in striking a balance, normal if you like, which by and large held up till recently. However, we now have to deal with China as both a neighbor as well as a potential superpower. For the first time, we have a superpower sharing a border with us. This is changing the complexion of our relationship with China. The old template is not enough, and we need to develop a new one to deal with China in both these avatars. And how is China developing into a superpower, its strengths and its weaknesses? I think these are all captured in the book. Why this granular understanding of China is important is that for these two avatars of China, India needs to put in place a far more nuanced set of policies rather than just merely predicating our relations on the progress on the border issue as a barometer of good relations. At a purely bilateral level or at a South Asia level, when we deal with China as a neighbor, we have been subjected to severe pulls and pressures. And some of these steps which we have taken bilaterally, though they are very much welcome and they are important, they are more symbolic than substantive. And we have to move next to also look at some harder issues like trade imbalance, market access to Indian goods and services, de-escalation, and many of this before we can go to a new normal in our relations. And thanks to all that has happened so far, as of now, our relations with China is highly securitized, which constrains progress in our relationship to this new normal that we are seeking. And in our neighborhood also, and this I've written about this in the Hindu as well, China has become very active again. In fact, it is their conscious policy to extend their strategic influence in our neighborhood. Their critical support to Pakistan during Operation Sindoor, proposing new groupings to encircle India, constructing, for example, the largest dam in Tibet, which is on their side of the Brahmaputra. And these are all manifestations of this policy. Unfortunately, this aggressive avatar of China as a neighbor pushes us towards other partners to counter them. In effect, China is making India do exactly what it does not want India to do. A greater understanding from China on our sensitivities and legitimate role in our neighborhood may help both of us to get to that new normal faster by generating a lot more trust than what we have now. However, once we get away from the bilateral and the neighborhood, this scenario changes. We are able to find greater synergy between the two countries in the regional, in the plurilateral, and in the global set of issues. And this is something which we have not adequately addressed or used to bring about greater understanding between our two countries. It is not for nothing that this century is being called the Asian century. The so-called liberal world order seems to be on a self-destruct mode. The institutional pillars which have held them up are collapsing. This is the time to find synergy with China on global challenges and on global standards that are being set. There is no need for India to be defensive about engaging China in the plurilateral and multilateral institutions, whether it's BRICS or SCO or East Asia. We need to be out there countering China where necessary, but also making common cause with China where we can. For example, the presence of China deterred us from joining RCEP agreement in East Asia, but joining would have probably helped us now to negotiate the tariffs and protectionist measures which are which is casting aside MFN and free trade and WTO rules. Now we are getting to trying to get the FTAs done with the EU and others to counter this economic fragmentation. So let us use this opportunity to think differently about China and truly seize the Asian century movement. So as you can see, some of the templates which we have worked on so far are broken, and we need new ones to replace them, including with China. And I hope this book contributes to a better understanding for the templates which we need to put in place. And thank you once again for doing the honor of inviting me for the release of this wonderful book. Thank you.
Book publishing is one of our most important and fast-growing verticals. And we've had a plethora of a range of issues that we discuss, from coffee table books, like the Chola and Harappa books, to a very important, significant political and social and economic books. And China is I think now the latest thing that will grab the attention of leaders. And as Dr. Tirumurti said, it gives us an opportunity to look at China in a new paradigm. The world has changed so much now. So it's important that we have a book like this, and very glad that all of you could be here. And thank you very much for coming and doing the honors. We'd be very delighted. And this is just going to be add to the crown of the books that we are publishing. Thank you.
After Mr. Tirumurti's thoughtful and succinct presentation, he knows the virtue of being succinct and not spinning it out. It's very clear, which is something to be learned. I now would invite, from a totally different perspective, a high-tech perspective, somebody who's been to China a lot and has a very refreshingly objective view of where it is when it comes to total power, or if he wishes, just the technology side of it. As a technological power, where is China today? I've had some informal conversations with him, but I think we should hear him now. And Mr. Santhanam.
I haven't read this book, so I'm really looking forward to getting some perspectives. My perspective on China is not on anything other than business. And the experience that I have is it's an extraordinarily high quality business enterprise, and surprisingly very different from what we imagine. And my view is that it's not as state driven as everybody assumes about China. It's much more entrepreneurs driven. And therefore, for me, there's a lot to learn from China for our Indian entrepreneurs. And what I find in China is deep hands-on technical expertise in their domains. The entrepreneurs are deeply hands-on and they're not at a distance from the industry. The second one, which I see, which is very different from the Western philosophies, which is really stick to the knitting. From a technology perspective, China does what is called the full stack. In industry after industry after industry over the last 3 decades, they've done the full stack.
notwithstanding the core competence, notwithstanding many of those. I think there's a lesson for us to learn when sometimes we try to do only a very limited thing as entrepreneurs or as companies or industries. I think as we move into this path of moving into this value chain on semiconductor, value chain on solar, value chain on energy, value chain on mobility, I think there's a lot to learn from the way China has done that. And I would say that an entrepreneurial perspective is more important than just the state's policy-driven objective, which is dominating our thought process. And so that's really what I say. I do hope that I'm going to read this book. I hope that it gives me something new to look at China.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to spring a surprise, which shouldn't be a surprise if you think about it. I'm going to ask Ananth Krishnan, former China correspondent of the Hindu, and who has an insider's view which none of us can claim because he's lived through it. He has a personal experience which cannot be matched by anyone in this room. So whatever is reluctance, I think it is your duty to viewers, readers, all of us to pull up your chair, come here and give us your thoughts. Not just on the book, but on your experience. I've had a hand in his being an insider in China, I can claim.
I think it's extremely timely initiative from Suresh. And two things stand out about this book on China, besides the fact that it's extremely timely given that we're seeing a moment of change in India's relations with China after the last few years after the border conflict. I think the first thing that makes this book stand out is, as far as I know, there isn't a book published that has entirely original Indian perspectives on relations with China, and not just on the bilateral side or the diplomatic side, but this covers China's economy, this covers China's innovation and what's happening on the tech side. It also covers what's happening in terms of China's domestic politics. So it looks at China on its own terms, but also offers views on how domestic changes in China affect its relations with India. So I think it presents a unique, a holistic view and an Indian perspective that makes this book stand out. And I think the second unique thing about this book is all of the contributors have spent time on the ground in China. Some are former diplomats, some have worked on trade and investment with China, and some are young scholars who've actually done field work on the ground in China, including one scholar who has visited Chinese projects in Africa. So we've selected a range of authors who actually have first-hand field experience. I think there's far too much being written with perspectives that aren't informed by being on the ground. So I think these two things make the book stand out, and we hope that readers will find it not just useful as a timely snapshot of what is happening in China at this moment, which of course is dealing with multiple different trends from, on the one hand, as we heard, moving up the tech value chain rapidly, but on the other hand, also dealing with enormous economic problems from an old economic model that's now running out of steam, also dealing with geopolitical challenges with tensions with the US and some neighbors, while at the same time having success in spreading its presence and influence in Central Asia, Africa, and Latin America, many other parts of the world. So it's a complicated moment. We hope that people will get a simplified understanding, which is still nuanced and timely, but also offers a very long-term view that I think will help readers make sense of where China is headed in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me here, Blair. And I'm the opinion page editor of The Hindu. And I'm very pleased to see this book coming out because, in many sense, from my perspective, it's an extension of the kinds of conversations that we promote on the opinion page. We've always stood for a robust, rich conversation and dialogue on China. We have a diversity of writers. Just the other day, we had a copy by the Chinese ambassador. But again, like Ananth said, we have a lot of young perspectives, some of whom Ananth, in fact, has introduced to our paper. And we look at all aspects of the India-China relationship. And China, as a standalone, as a country that is literally, as someone said, on the verge of being a superpower, already is one. Not just the border issues, which of course predominate in these dialogues, but also in terms of Chinese society and history and what it contributes to the world as a critical power at this juncture in world politics. So it's quite interesting that, as I think Ambassador said earlier, the old world order is tottering in terms of the rules-based international ecosystem, but at the same time, it is China and India that have benefited enormously over the last several decades. And it's quite ironic that they are offering, in a sense, a counter-argument to the West, which now seems to have abandoned the very precepts that it helped formulate. So on the opinion pages, we look at all these issues critically, and it's just wonderful that the Hindu group is taking that forward in the form of books. Hopefully there'll be many more to come, and we will always stand at the forefront of these conversations, keeping them broad-based, not looking at them with any bias, but genuinely seeking to advance our understanding of both China as well as the India-China relationship. So I'm very pleased to be associated with this too.
Thank you.
Hi. China is, as regards India is concerned, it's as Ambassador pointed out earlier, on the one side, China is the neighbor with whom India has an answer to border dispute. And on the other side, China has a superpower. So you have a world order that is now unraveling. So India has its own ambitions. It's a rising power. It's already the world's fifth largest economy. So on the one side, India has to manage the changes in the global order. And on the other side, India has to deal with a neighbor with whom you have an unresolved border problem, but at the same time, a major power. So this poses enormous challenges as well as opportunities for India. So at the Hindu, we have always emphasized ground coverage on China. We have supported call for more predictable, stable relationship with this big neighbor. So Hindu always had ground reporters in India, in China. So Ananth Krishnan has reported from China for over a decade for the Hindu and other publications. So this is an initiative. This book is curated by Ananth. So as Ananth pointed out earlier, most of all the essays are written by scholars who had spent time in China. So this offers a perspective from the ground, and this also helps India in policy formulation going forward, how to deal with China. So China is a challenge as well as an opportunity for India and the larger world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I remember in passing I mentioned that with the type of deal which US and China are trying to get, and also the pressure which US is exerting on their allies, they will actually end up making China great again rather than America great again. Yeah. So that is what I had mentioned in passing.
My first visit to China was in April, May of 1978. Soon after full diplomatic relations had been established. That was in 76. And our first ambassador after a long break was a happy choice, K.R. Narayanan. Incidentally, a former editorial writer in The Hindu. He started his career here before he went to the London School of Economics and later President of India. So his term was nearing an end. Not quite the end, but the last part of his term. And so my first visit was there, and he was very gracious. I was able to meet some people, interesting ideas. The first visit. It was unusual in those days for Indian journalists to be allowed to visit China, get visas to visit China. So it was a great opportunity. And the next visit was in February of 1979, which I think could have made bigger news than it did. It was External Affairs Minister A.B. Vajpayee's very bold visit to China, much against conventional views in India. I think he was quite a significant political figure at that time, and he must have taken the initiative for this visit. There was criticism in the media. I think he showed a forward-looking and positive attitude, in my view, to you couldn't say establish normal relations, but move forward in some way. But unfortunately, China invaded Vietnam at the very time he was there, towards the end of the visit, and he had to cut short. I was there with him, and he shared some perspectives on what it could be, and I really appreciate that effort at that time. It was aborted actually. But gradually over that period in the 80s, many steps were taken on both sides to move towards the real breakthrough moment, which I can never forget. I'll come to that in a minute. External Affairs Minister Tiwari's visit, several visits during that period. I must have made to date about at least 25 visits. I'm still trying to count up to May of this year. But the Vajpayee visit was something that could have achieved limited results, but very positive results, and couldn't quite do that. But perhaps it sent a message that within the Indian political system, even though he belonged to the right, and then the Jansang, as part of the Janata Party, there was some hope that message would have been sent for positive measures. In mid-79, a small group of Indian journalists, including Avik Sarkar, about 4 of us, I think, were invited to visit Tibet. And I unfortunately flunked the medical test and couldn't go. They went and were quite impressed, I think, Avik Sarkar and a couple of others. But unfortunately, I couldn't go. It took another 20 years for me to visit Tibet, and I've done about 4 visits to different, not just Lhasa, but other areas in Tibet after that. But the real breakthrough moment, I think, came in 1988, December 88, during the Rajiv Gandhi visit. I think Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi deserves a lot of credit for what can be, looking at it today, can only be called a courageous step, because there was a lot of caution within the for External Affairs Ministry and the other parts of the government. Rajiv Gandhi also had problems. The Bofors issue had come to the fore. The Sri Lankan imbroglio had to be resolved. It was soon after it was a year after the Indo-Sri Lanka agreement was signed, and then the Ayodhya, there's noises made on the Ayodhya issue as well at that time. So for Rajiv Gandhi to take this step, it's Ashok Kanta in that gives due credit to this in his essay in the book. And I think it was, I remember when Rajiv Gandhi came to Chennai, to Madras at that time, to address a huge gathering on the Indo-Sri Lanka agreement on the marina. I was invited to travel back with him to Delhi on his aircraft, and we discussed Sri Lanka. But among other things, he asked, do you think it should be a summit visit or a step by step? And I immediately said summit. Not that it mattered. I think he had already decided, but he was trying to get views that would confirm his decision. He must have asked 100 people. But I know that Mr. Narasimha Rao was very, very cautious, I would say. I don't know, I had to use the word carefully. I wouldn't say negative or skeptical, but very cautious. And I don't think he was in favor of this bold step. The Hindu also had a bit of an exclusive then, because President Venkatraman gave me a tip that something big. I think there was a general expectation, but quite specific. So we were able to carry this news, and it wasn't an entire surprise at that time when the real breakthrough in my view, in India-China relations post-62 occurred, where, going back a little, Vajpayee, Deng Xiaoping and the Great Hall of the People, I remember, shook hands with External Affairs Minister Vajpayee and said, we've been away too long. Let's try to resolve the boundary question, but if you cannot, let's put it to the side and go about improving relations all round. The same message, almost the same words, were used by Deng Xiaoping, the paramount leader of China, particularly in the 80s. Said to Rajiv Gandhi after saying, I knew your grandfather, etc. And it was a very warm meeting, and although India didn't agree to put it to the side, I think that's what happened, because we must recognize, I think all the essays here, I don't think nobody proposes a solution here. They're only saying it's a long shadow cast over the boundary question. There are claims that a package deal was envisaged, particularly pushed by Deng Xiaoping, but it didn't come to be. I don't know if it's true or not. But so that China has moved away from this. But that is the hard issue. Everybody knows it. And no solution is available in this book. We can't claim to have any acceptable and sustainable solution. I think it's an intractable issue which is going to take a very long time. As long as there are domestic constraints on policy making on both sides, particularly on the Indian side, I don't think the bold steps needed on the so-called give and take track, which Premier Chou En-lai first broached before 62, in the lead up to 62. I think that unless somebody does that and takes the kind of courageous step that Rajiv Gandhi took, whatever the impulses and propelling factors, I think he deserves the most credit. And after that, every leader, every prime minister has not deviated from that track. Of course, there have been setbacks. There have been other factors that impinge on this track. But the best proof of the benefits of this is, I think it's mentioned in the book, that from about 600 million two-way trade, US dollars, in the early 90s, I don't know if it's 90 or 91, it's mentioned here. Today, two-way trade, Ananth, would be about 140 billion US. China is either India's leading trade partner or one of the top two, or the second, along with the US. But India is nowhere near the top of the list of China's trading partners. And so that I think is the big benefit. That you talk about China's trade surpluses, India's deficits and so on. But in the long run, they don't really matter, because it's the total deficit that matters. So you use it as a negotiating ploy to get what you want, which is perfectly legitimate. But I think that's the proof that that this breakthrough really delivered benefits, long-term benefits on this. During my last two visits to China, thanks to Ananth, who arranged very worthwhile conversations or briefings with the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs dealing with India and many other Asian countries, Sun Wei-dong, lasting about a couple of hours in one or two cases. I got a pretty good idea. This is not for use, just for as a briefing for somebody from India. I learned that right now they are pursuing a well thought out, well structured approach to India, and the kind of issues that he mentioned are exchange of journalists, visa facilitation, because China gives a lot of visas to Indian visitors, tourists as well as business people who visit. Whereas on the other side, it's very restrictive. And so far as journalists are concerned, I think India unnecessarily denied proper visa facilitation to Chinese journalists, and they couldn't stay on here. And they reciprocated, and we were one of the casualties, the Hindu. So I think to resume that, as far as Prime Minister Narendra Modi's approach is concerned, I have some insights from the past. When he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, I've had conversations with him where he advocated stronger relations. He admired China's development in many areas. For example, I remember one conversation on skills development, where India was lagging far behind. Whether that gap has been narrowed, I'm not getting into that. Some progress has been made, but people like Santhanam would be better qualified to comment on that. Whether we've learned enough from China's development. My thought on the book, I think there are some very strong essays of the 12 contributors. I think the I personally found Vijay Gokhale's long essay, Deciphering the China Conundrum, the most interesting and valuable, fairly objective. And I found Ashok Kanta's, former Ambassador Ashok Kanta's 60-page essay on the trajectory of and ups and downs of India-China relations, very useful. It's for its factual thoroughness and narrative thoroughness. Although I think there are not many ideas there for how this can be resolved. It's a very long essay, perhaps overlong, but very, very useful. And I think for documentation on this, I think a lot of people will find this invaluable. Manoj Keval Ramani's longish essay on political trends and the history-making changes in the Xi Jinping era is a serious attempt to understand and come to terms with it. There's a lot of material on this, huge literature, books. But he does justice to Xi's anti-corruption campaigns and his no-nonsense attempt to rejuvenate the Communist Party of China at the ideological level. And it's his view there, and I think it's useful. I was very impressed with Lieutenant General Narasimhan's essay on China's military modernization and implications for India. A study that stands apart from most of the rest for its professional expertise, refreshing intellectual straightforwardness in the military field, and a fairly accessible presentation. There's not much. I think you'll find in most of the essays there is an element of wishful thinking, in my view. That somehow, when they talk about China's rise in a comparative framework, I think there's an element of wishful thinking which is unavoidable if you're writing from here, tinged with some nationalist preconceptions and leanings, because I wish we had got one or two Chinese contributors. Ananth must have tried. Did you?
Next fall.
There have been some good scholars on the Chinese side. I remember my first early meetings with Sun Pei-jun, who wrote as P.C. Sun in the old days. He was a India scholar in China who had specialized on the Punjab and so on. And he lived a long life. I kept in touch with him. Very, very positive approach to improving relations with India. His career was cut short by the Cultural Revolution and resumed after 1978. But I think there's some good scholarly work there, and it'd be interesting to get there. Although today, given the constrained state of free speech in India, how much you can publish is a question. If it directly challenges your narrative, if they say that, that's an issue. But I think we could have accommodated those. There are some weak essays. I don't want to name them. One or two, which I think any book would carry. Any collection would have that kind of unevenness. But I wish not just in this collection, but in what is available in terms of in the sphere of Indian scholarship, there were bold scholars like Meera Sinha. Meera Sinha was a former diplomat, right? Who gave up her career and became a China scholar. She knew the language, and I think I used to be in the so-called eminent persons group, India-China, a few times, and I remember the kind of bold discussions that took place. And once or twice when people like me expressed strong opinions, criticizing our own approach to dealing with China in those meetings, one Indian ambassador was very miffed because the ambassador said that you can't express these views, or it was said on our behalf, when our representative was present in those meetings, which appeared to me a very strange kind of rule or norm. But the short point is, I think that kind of bold scholarship, which directly challenged conventional wisdom on the rise of China, or particularly India-China relations, I think is missing today. And I hope Ananth will be able to find those voices, if they exist, and so on. And there have been even people like Subramaniam Swamy have in the past expressed in his own way quite bold thoughts about how to deal with China. And I think that is missing in the Indian conversations, scholarly as well as political and lay today, I think. But having said that, it's a very good start. These are just my views, and I think the Hindu has long stood for a well-studied, careful, but forward-looking approach in dealing with China, editorially. Much before I became editor, I think this was the view after an unhappy period around 62. And I must also say that our former news editor, Mr. K. Narayan, the late, once told me that he had a conversation with Paramacharya in Kanchi, who he said, and I believed him, it's only his word, but he was a man of journalist of great integrity, spoke to him about the need to mend fences with China and make up relations in the long term. I say it with full responsibility. I've said it before. This conversation, and I don't know if it made any difference, but that kind of thinking was also there in unexpected quarters. So I think I'll end on that note. A very good. I think it's, even if we say so, it's a very worthwhile book, and a lot of credit to our editor Suresh Nambath and our curator Ananth Krishnan for this. And thank you to Ambassador Tirumurti and my friend our independent director in the holding company, Mr. V. Santhanam, the distinguished business leader with a lot of experience, particularly in this area. So, good. And thank you for this opportunity. And I hope the book will be read, will be properly distributed. People will pick it up, and conversations will be held around it.